sa susretanu sarasala bile druga velala lume, na unkve, lonava unkve obrazanu na viša Etherika Sylvaeron.
In a place where epic expanses intertwine with scientific imagination, we'll encounter races from other planets, both good and evil, and peer into the higher etheric energies that permeate our material universe. In the higher etheric energy, the trap closed. It was not a trap of material, inert matter, nor a dense web woven from threads of light. It was a grandiose interdimensional blockade, a brilliant severance in the very fabric of existence, created by the wisdom of the ancient Sylvaerons and the inconceivable power of the dimensions themselves. This trap ensnared the essence of the threat, cutting off its path to the material worlds. Millions of Sylvaerons, fighters and heroes who had bravely entered that vast expanse, were now in their true form as warriors of the higher etheric energy. Beings of light and pure will, they stood ready to face the unimaginable. Their etheric forms awaited the entities of the void, prepared for the final confrontation. Every Sylvaeron felt the weight of generations upon their etheric shoulders, echoes of the etheric books, memories that simultaneously frightened and strengthened them. They felt not only fear, but pride, knowing they were the last line of defense, the fulfillment of a promise made to existence itself, a lighthouse of hope in the multidimensional expanse. The higher etheric energy was now flooded with the luminous orange ochre colors of the Guardians. Their influence continued to resonate through every vibration of space, like a continuous, protective whisper permeating the ether itself. Mingled with the aquamarine and turquoise shades of the Sylvaerons' higher etheric suits, this expanse became the theater of a higher etheric conflict. The spectrum of colors was a kaleidoscope of energy, a reflection of clashing forces and the delicate balance struggling to survive. Every hue told a story of power, resistance, and uncertainty, the intertwining colors creating a living tapestry of battle. It was a higher etheric struggle that was just beginning, a conflict that would define the fate of all existence, a battle that transcended the comprehension of information and space, merging past, present, and future into a single fluid reality. In this expanse of higher etheric energy, where the resonance of life collided with the void, where fundamental forces crossed in a dance of destructive and creative energy, the fate of all that is and will be would finally be decided. It was the finale of an epic that had lasted for eons, a battle whose echo would resound through the higher etheric energy forever. The darkness refracted. It was not darkness as the absence of light. It was the suffocation of the very essence of existence, a cold, breathing void. A creeping, vibrating gloom permeated every scalar string, threatening to extinguish even the life spark. It looked as if nothingness itself had taken form, pulsating with the cold of the abyss, imbued with an unutterable malice, seeking to devour all that was light and pure. It was not a passive entity. It was a living, dissonant force, the antithesis of all that was created, the primordial enemy of existence itself. In the higher etheric energy, dimensions dissolved into vibrant, pulsating glimmers of light and shadow, creating a landscape that defied all material logic. Here, where the scale of space was but a mere echo of a distant memory, and time was non-existent, where material forms had ceased to be only the vibrations of the ether, held meaning and reality. Everything happened in information. Mountains of etheric energy rose and collapsed in information. Seas of scalar strings rippled under the charge of battle, and the sky was an infinite canvas of iridescent higher etheric colors, from the brightest white to the deepest purple, all in a dance of destruction. The medium itself, the air, if it could be called that in the expanse of pure ether, was made of millions of refracting, light yellow, and magical turquoise scalar strings. These strings intertwined and unraveled in inconceivable patterns, forming a hypnotizing yet dangerous web, a higher etheric dance of energy and information, where each string carried a story of eons of existence. They were living threads, paths that could be used, but also traps that could close, transforming into energy vortices that would catch even the most experienced warriors. Through this boundless, pulsating web, the actors of the greatest conflict ever to resonate through dimensions moved with lightning speed. A battle that was just beginning to tear the very matrix of the higher etheric energy, threatening to undo it to its fundamental threads. Every movement along these strings was like sliding on the edge of a precipice, requiring absolute concentration and perfection of control, for the smallest error meant the loss of the spark in the ether. In this etheric reality, combat was not a clash of fists and weapons, but a conflict of mind, will, and vibrational frequencies. Every bit of information, every thought was a strategy. Every strike was an attempt to disrupt the vibrational coherence of the opponent, to make them collapse into fundamental components and return to nothingness. Echoes of ancient conflicts refracted through the ether, creating vortices of energy that could disorient even the most seasoned fighters, drawing them into temporal dissonances where past and present intertwined in a chaotic dance. No matter how hard they tried to reach the outlines of the future, it remained impenetrable, like a cipher without a key. They found themselves in a state of total confusion. Their abilities within the higher etheric energy, which had previously given them an advantage, were now silent. Predictions were absent. It was as if a conscious force had placed an insurmountable barrier before tomorrow, locking away every piece of data about what was to come. There was no noise, only the resonance of destruction spreading through the collective consciousness, penetrating the deepest layers of the etheric being, leaving a sense of dread, cold, and ignorance that reached the very essence of the soul, threatening to extinguish even the strongest spark of light. Millions of Sylvaerons, in their true form as higher etheric energy warriors, were a sight of majesty, a spectacle of pure will and light that took one's breath away, even in the etheric expanse. They were not made of flesh, but of pure, shaped will and concentrated light. Their essence was a manifestation of higher, etheric energy, guided by collective purpose, each individual a thread in the complex tapestry of collective consciousness. They appeared as countless, pulsating light points and elegant elongated lines, imbued with the aquamarine and turquoise hues of their higher etheric suits, which flowed over their etheric bodies. They had no faces in the classic sense, but their forms radiated individuality, emanating an aura of ancient wisdom and unyielding determination. Each form was unique, a reflection of a singular spark submerged in the collective, yet perfectly synchronized, like parts of a single living mechanism, tirelessly aligned in purpose. Every point, every line, was a perfectly tuned entity, capable of moving by superluminal information along the mapped scalar strings of the ether. But they could also vanish and reappear outside them as pure energy signatures of will, bridging distances within the higher etheric energy in the information of inconceivable thought. Their agility was stunning, unpredictable to the enemy, a dance of etheric virtuosity, a poetic display of combat. One moment they were here, the next on the other side of the etheric battlefield, leaving behind only a flash of light and etheric resonances that dispersed. Their movements were not physical, but mental, strategic moves of the mind manifested as lightning-fast changes of position and form, evading and attacking with unprecedented precision. Their weapons, etheric destabilizers, were not material objects, but focused projections of mental energy directed by will. They were capable of shattering the coherence of enemy vibrations, sending shockwaves through the ether itself that tore at the structure of the void entities, turning them into chaotic, energetic remnants and temporarily neutralizing their ability to multiply. When they attacked, their luminous forms elongated into sharp flashes, piercing the barriers of the void with incredible ease. Then they would immediately return to fluid shapes, avoiding counterattacks that came from all directions. Like swarms of hungry predators, they did not tire. They felt no pain in the physical sense, but they suffered on a deeper, etheric level. With every extinguished spark of an ally, the collective consciousness of Sylvaeron would tremble, and they felt it as their own wound, as the snapping of an invisible thread that joined them all into one, a pain deeper than the physical, a sense of emptiness in the very etheric being. Their determination was granite-like, but the pain of loss was real, permeating every particle of their being. Yet, they continued the fight, knowing the stakes were higher than any individual etheric spark. The future of existence itself depended on their endurance. They were not just warriors, they were heroes, and they bore that burden with dignity, aware of every sacrifice being made, of every lost brother and sister. Every fall was a reminder of the purpose of their struggle, of the millennial legacy that had to be protected. Around them, like living walls of impenetrable will, the light orange ochre auras of the guardians resonated. These monumental entities, composed of pure, ancient, higher etheric energy, had no fixed shape. They overflowed and pulsated, changing density and brilliance according to the strength of the defense they provided, as if the sparks themselves were woven into their being, offering sanctuary and strength. Their presence was simultaneously soothing and terrifying, a lighthouse of hope in the etheric storm. They were anchors of stability amidst etheric chaos. Their power bent the scalar strings around them, creating protective fields that repelled direct attacks from the void, as if the fields of the scalar strings themselves were redirecting, repelling the strongest strikes effortlessly into nothingness. Their will was older than the stars, their existence inseparably tied to the balance of the material and non-material dimensions. Within their auras, the Sylvaerons felt a surge of strength, an amplification of their own etheric shields, as if they were immersed in the very heart of the higher etheric energy, giving them additional endurance. When they concentrated, their energy projections like giant lasers, woven from pure information, cut through the enemy's front lines, temporarily destabilizing them and returning them to a chaotic state, giving the Sylvaerons precious moments for counterattack and regrouping. They did not move. They were motionless, like lighthouses in a storm, their presence itself a defense, an impenetrable wall of light and will, a living symbol of resistance. Their presence was empowering, infusing etheric strength and resilience into the Sylvaerons. They were silent pillars of hope, their vibrations a comfort in a sea of disharmony, unheard but powerful allies. Their ancient wisdom, stored in the ether itself, served as a strategic guide in this inconceivable conflict, giving the Sylvaerons insights into the weaknesses of the void that they would not have discovered alone. They were witnesses of eons, and their resolve was as deep as existence itself, inseparably bound to the universal order, the foundation that held the weaving of the ether not allowing it to unravel even under the strongest pressure of the void. But the darkness had its own resonance, its own terrifying dynamic. The entities of the void were not just formless, malevolent, red pulsating masses, or lightning-fast, sharp lines. They were a living hydra, intelligent and discerning, with a mind that functioned on the principle of devouring and adapting, always seeking weaknesses and opportunities. Their form was unstable, shifting from slime to sharp, crystalline shapes, all within a single pulsating bit of information, adapting to the Sylvaerons' attacks. Their essence was a pure vector of primordial hunger, but also of a treacherous intelligence, capable of multiplying in an instant, turning every attack into a swarm of new threats. Every severed thread of a void entity created more new ones, equally dangerous, which immediately adapted to the new environment, changing their vibrational frequencies to evade subsequent attacks, becoming more resistant to the Sylvaerons' destabilizers, learning and evolving with every strike. Their regeneration was horrifyingly fast, in a fraction of information, turning every defeat into an opportunity for spread, like an etheric plague. They had no mind in the usual sense, but a collective consciousness of devouring, amplified by a malicious discernment that allowed them to recognize the opponent's weaknesses, to find cracks in the Sylvaerons' mental shields and strategies, to crawl into every weakness and exploit it with eerie precision. They read fear, pain, and fatigue, using them as weapons, sending mental waves of despair that penetrated the deepest layers of the etheric being, trying to destroy the Sylvaerons' will from within. Their movements were chaotic yet relentless, like swarms of starving insects devouring light, capable of manifesting as terror at any point in existence, draining the life spark with absolute, terrifying efficiency, leaving behind only empty, lifeless shadows, an echo of quenched life. Their lust for etheric energy was insatiable, endless, and threatened to devour the very matrix of existence, leaving behind only an echo of nothingness, an absolute void. They were no longer just a threat to the material world. Their power and adaptability, the ability to absorb and transform energy, threatened to destroy the higher etheric energy itself, devouring scalar strings and disrupting its stability, introducing dissonance into the very harmony of the higher etheric energy, threatening to break the laws of the ether. Their attacks were not just physical. They were strikes at the psyche itself, attempts to destroy the opponent's will and make consciousness collapse into nothingness before the etheric spark itself was extinguished. It seemed the void enjoyed the process of destruction, the quelling of light, the very agony of its victims, feeding on fear and despair, twisting even the purest vibrations to its advantage, turning them into its own dark essence. The battle was not a clash of bodies, but an orchestrated symphony and dissonance of scalar vibrations. There were no audible explosions, but refractions of light and sensations that echoed through the ether, creating vortices of etheric energy that changed perception and disoriented the enemy. The conflict of thoughts manifested as lightning movements, energy collisions, and destructions, echoing through the information of the higher etheric energy, creating temporary pockets of instability, small dimensional anomalies that opened and closed, threatening to swallow everything in their path. Communication occurred telepathically, through resonant thoughts intertwining in the networks of the ether, creating a field of continuous exchange of information and feelings, where every thought was transparent to other Sylvaerons, allowing for perfect coordination. Strategy was instantaneous, based on reading energy flows and manipulating scalar frequencies, predicting the opponent's moves and bending reality itself to their advantage, creating temporary paths through the ether that only they could use, making them practically untouchable to direct attacks. Every Sylvaeron, every guardian, was part of a single mind, connected by threads of telepathy. Decisions were made in information, and actions executed with perfect synchronization, like a perfectly rehearsed orchestra whose instruments were the etheric energy itself. The fight took place on countless fronts, simultaneously in the present and the recent past. For in the higher etheric energy, time does not exist, allowing for complex, non-linear maneuvers that confused and overwhelmed the void. But echoes of the future were absent. Without that key part of the non-linear spectrum, their strategy lost its predictive power, leaving them without knowledge of the enemy's next step. The Sylvaerons moved as a fluid whole, evading, attacking, and retreating in perfect harmony. They felt no physical fatigue, but the etheric effort was enormous, threatening to exhaust their essence, to break them into pure energy, testing the limits of their endurance. Every maneuver was a dance of survival and strategy, a struggle testing the boundaries of existence itself, a ballet with death where every mistake meant nothingness, final dispersal into the ether. Ilara, the leader communicator, whose luminous form bore the weight of every extinguished spark, felt the collective suffering of his race. His mind, an unbroken bridge between the material and the etheric, was open to desperate calls from distant spheres. Within him, sadness mingled with rage, but above all stood an unshakable will to save Sylvaeron. The struggle was becoming harder. He felt the collective etheric energy of the Sylvaerons diminishing, threatening to snap, to shatter into pieces of light. As he emitted mental frequencies coordinating the defense, he felt the waves of the void intensifying, threatening to overwhelm him. His luminous form trembled on the edge of exhaustion. The void tried to infiltrate his thoughts, to extinguish his hope, to pull doubt into his mind. to break him from within, tempting him with promises of power if he surrendered, whispering about the hopelessness of their fight. Surrender. Darkness is all. There is no light. There is no salvation. Embrace nothingness. Free yourself from pain. This insidious suggestion penetrated deep into his consciousness, trying to quench the last flame of hope. Suddenly, amidst the chaos and collective suffering, he felt a presence. He had not sought them, but they had found him. The collective consciousness of the travelers, the ancient race of etheric nomads whom the Sylvaerons had once helped, suddenly addressed Ilara. It was not a mere sound, but a direct transfer of feelings and knowledge, a merging of minds that flooded Ilara with hope amidst the despair as he felt the arrival of countless allies. Their etheric resonance was like a melody in a cacophony, a promise of long-forgotten harmony, a tone vibrating at the frequency of salvation. We feel your resonance, your pain. We feel the great distortion and suffering of your race. We remember your kindness. We are coming. Travelers never forget a debt. The words echoed directly in his etheric being, not as sound, but as a thought imbued with ancient power and unyielding resolve. Ilara felt a wave of relief, but also wonder. How did they find us? How did they sense our plight across so many dimensions? Was it destiny, or a thread they had followed through the ether for cycles, connecting good deeds across inconceivable distances? Was this an ancient prophecy of an alliance of light now being fulfilled? There was no time for answers. Their arrival was real. He felt millions of new etheric signatures materializing at the edge of the higher etheric energy. It was a sign, a flash of hope in the darkest hour, a promise of a turning point. His spirit soared, realizing they were not alone in this fight, that the threads of destiny intertwined in ways even he could not fully grasp. "Hold the line," he mentally broadcast to the Sylvaerons, his voice amplified through the collective consciousness. "Reinforcements are coming. The travelers have responded." A wave of hope flowed through the Sylvaeron ranks, giving them new strength, new vigor, amplifying their etheric shields and attacks. Morale rose, and with it the fervor of battle, turning the tide at that crucial moment. Ilara felt a new weight of responsibility, but also a new strength within, a readiness to endure until the end. As the losses of the Sylvaerons and Guardians mounted, and as it seemed that even the Guardians, though powerful, would be overwhelmed by the endless, multiplying invasion of the void, the ether flickered. The higher etheric energy lit up with new, powerful, yet chaotic vibrations. It was not a usual arrival but a break in the etheric flow itself, as if space had bent for a moment, opening a rift for their unstoppable appearance. Countless light points and lines of travelers, each with a unique, ancient understanding of etheric flows and the ability to bend dimensions, entered the conflict, bringing a wave of unknown power. Their forms were diverse, from brilliant spheres to elegant, transparent spirals, each with its unique etheric signature, reflecting thousands of cycles of travel and adaptation. Some resembled higher etheric flashes, while others were like flickering, shining sparks, leaving behind a trail of etheric dust that shimmered in rainbow colors, disrupting the void's sight. Their movements were simultaneously fluid and precise, a dance of coordinated chaos where each entity was part of a larger whole, yet possessed its own etheric authenticity, tirelessly fighting for the light. Their combat technique was a merger of mental discipline and ancient etheric rituals, creating protective fields that repelled the void entities, turning their attacks into harmless waves. Meanwhile, their energy projections cut through enemy ranks like etheric razors, creating paths through the thick darkness, temporarily quelling the void's multiplication and shattering their forms into elementary parts. Some travelers, like light waves, passed directly through the void entities, destabilizing them from within before the entities could multiply again, causing permanent damage to their vibrational matrix, a slow but inevitable decay, turning them into harmless etheric remnants. Their presence brought a new dynamic, a new front in the battle, forcing the void entities to disperse their resources and shift focus from the main Sylvaeron lines. The fight became even more chaotic, but now with a glimmer of hope, as the forces of light united in a way the void could not have predicted. The travelers moved in constantly changing formations, like rushing swarms of brilliant light, confusing and overwhelming the enemy. Every movement was like an ancient song, a symphony of destruction for the void and creation for the light, a confirmation of their ancient strength, flooding the battlefield with new vibrations, new information, and new waves of etheric energy, turning the tide in favor of the light. However, the void was a force of adaptation, unprecedented in its malevolent intelligence. Like an etheric virus, it learned from every defeat, from every destroyed form. Their luminous red masses began to reshape, developing new, inconceivable defense systems. The energy projections of the travelers, which had previously passed through them like a knife through the ether, now encountered invisible, pulsating barriers that absorbed or redirected attacks. The sharp lines of the void developed the ability to reflect destabilizing frequencies back at the Sylvaerons and travelers, causing brief but exhausting etheric dissonances that disrupted their coherence and slowed them down. The multiplication of the void became even faster and more chaotic, Every destroyed entity would now split not into 2, but 3 or 4 smaller, yet extremely aggressive forms, which immediately changed their vibrational frequency, making them nearly impossible to locate and destroy again. They began merging into larger, amorphous masses, capable of devouring entire sections of the ether, leaving behind zones of absolute nothingness that drained light and energy from any Sylvaerons or travelers who drew too near. The malevolent gloom breathed, spreading like a metastasis, swallowing even the ancient light of the guardians. Despair began to creep into the collective consciousness. The travelers, though immeasurably powerful, had not encountered such adaptation from the void. Their cyclic rituals and etheric knowledge proved insufficient. They felt their own etheric energy being exhausted, as if their inner light were going out. Their protective auras began to fade, their movements became slower, and the harmony of their collective dance was disrupted under the onslaught of continuous, ever-strengthening counterattacks. Some of them began to withdraw, their forms flickering on the edge of dispersal, while others, too exhausted, slowly sank into the abyss of the void, leaving behind only sad, extinguished sparks that disintegrated into the ether. The Sylvaerons fought with their last atoms of etheric strength. They saw the light of the travelers waning and realized they too had reached the limit. Ilara felt the collective shield of the Sylvaerons thinning, cracks appearing in their impenetrable will. His luminous form pulsed with pain and despair, but also with the last rays of hope. The void had become too discerning, too adaptive. There was no solution in their etheric treasury of knowledge. No strategy could stop this new, evolved threat. The guardians still resonated, but their light was now darker, dimmed by the weight of battle, and their influence was becoming smaller before the encroaching nothingness. It was the moment when it was realized that everyone, absolutely everyone, had reached their limits. On the edge of the battle, unobserved by the actors, but present in their undisputed magnitude, appeared other entities, from even higher etheric energies, brilliant, unshaped forms, with colors ranging from light yellow to emerald and amethyst. The observers moved at superluminal speeds, in information passing through the chaos, and the fighters themselves unhindered. Never interfering, they merely bore witness to the conflict. They had no shape. They were a pure reflection of existence, impersonal and eternal, woven into the very fabric of the higher etheric energy. They were neither good nor evil, but manifestations of pure energy. Their presence hinted at levels of existence that transcended even this fight, reminding of the infinite hierarchies of power in the higher etheric energy levels beyond any Sylvaeron comprehension. They could change density, becoming nearly invisible or overflowing into giant etheric mountains. so long as they did not obstruct the battle, while they watched every detail with absolute, cold precision, recording every movement, every vibration, and every bit of information. Their forms were fluid, eternal, without beginning or end. Their luminous silhouettes pulsed with quiet but powerful resonances, witnessing absolute knowledge and inseparable presence in all dimensions, without any desire to interfere in what they considered a lower conflict. They simply were, and they observed, absorbing every vibration, every piece of information, every wave of energy in silent contemplation of the etheric drama. They did not fear, they did not regret. They only recorded, as if this battle were just another data point in the endless etheric register, inconceivable for ordinary mortals. Their presence, though passive, was a reminder of a vast, incomprehensible force lying beyond known dimensions, suggesting that the higher etheric energy possesses layers no being can fully understand. They were the silent keepers of etheric laws, witnesses of all creation and destruction, beyond good and evil, beyond understanding the reflection of information itself, etched into the fabric of the higher etheric energy, eternal observers of the inconceivable. In moments of despair, when the loss was enormous and hope had almost vanished, Kyle, the legendary hero of Sylvaeron and master of etheric destabilization, along with several dozen Sylvaeron heroes, made a desperate decision in the midst of the greatest struggle, while the void entities multiplied and devoured light from every side surrounding them from all sides of space and information. Kale felt their strength failing. Their etheric forms were fading, and the collective consciousness felt the pressure of the abyss threatening to swallow them. He looked at Ileana, whose luminous form trembled under the strikes of the void, her shields barely holding. He knew what he had to do. His decision was final in the information, without hesitation, resolved in the information of etheric insight. Within him, peace replaced fear, and love for Sylvaeron and Ileana flooded everything else, giving him his final strength. "Forgive me, Ileana," he broadcast into her thoughts, a message imbued with love and pain that cut through the ether. "This is the only way. Remember us. Live. You must live. Our light must never go out. Our existence must continue, even if it means my end. I am but a drop in the ocean, but that ocean must survive." In that brief, mental information, Kale sublimated all his will and directed it toward one goal: breaking the endless multiplication of the void, even if it meant cutting the thread of his own existence. He knew it was the only chance to stop the terror. His light flickered, ready for the final sacrifice. Brighter than ever, the last flash of hope, an essence of courage that echoed through the higher etheric energy, leaving a brilliant trail behind. Using advanced skills in manipulating scalar vibrations, they suddenly shifted into the past to the very moment when the evil entities had just entered the higher etheric energy. And when, on the other side, the veil was sealed. This was the void's key moment of vulnerability before they had fully adapted to the new reality. They appeared as superluminal brilliant lines rushing through the void entities, creating light cuts in the darkness. Their primary higher etheric weapons, etheric destabilizers, cut them down and destroyed them by the thousands, creating temporary gaps in their coherence, causing a temporary collapse of their multiplying ability. It was a moment of shock and surprise for the void entities, who in the information could not grasp the non-linear attack. But it was also a shock for the Sylvaerons, travelers, and guardians watching the fight from the present time, witnessing an incredible act of self-sacrifice occurring out of time, an act that bridged the gap between past and present, changing the course of destiny, creating a temporary temporal loop that gave them the advantage and a chance for survival. But the price was terrible, a price that rent the ether and the hearts of all Sylvaerons. In that flash of lightning attack in the past, the void entities, guided by their malicious discernment, drained the life spark from Kale's heroes in the information, including Kale himself. There was no physical manifestation of destruction, no visible scream, only a sharp, vibrational pain that echoed through the Sylvaeron collective consciousness, cutting their etheric connection with every lost spark, leaving behind a cold emptiness, a scar on the collective soul. The scenes were horrific, even in the etheric expanse. The heroes' light forms were extinguished, dissolving into nothingness. Every quenched spark was as if a star went out in the heart of Sylvaeron, leaving behind a resonating void, a scar on the collective soul. The grief was almost palpable, like an icy wave rushing through the scalar ether, reaching every Sylvaeron present in the higher etheric energy, overwhelming them with a sense of loss that surpassed understanding, a sense of universal sorrow. The heroine Ileana, master of etheric energy, stood on the front line of combat in the present time. Her mental shields trembled as she witnessed Kale's sacrifice with a broken heart, unfolding before her etheric eyes out of the usual flow of time. She felt every extinguished etheric signature, every lost vibration, and the pain of losing her dear Kale was a wave of unmeasurable grief that flooded her etheric being, threatening to bring her down, to quench her own light. But within herself, she found a new, dark strength, a will born from the ashes of grief. Kale, no, I cannot lose you. Your light, extinguished. Why by the ether? Why did you go there alone? You are our hope, our light. Without you, the void pulls me, but I must not. No, I must stay for him, for all of us. I will not let your sacrifice be in vain, my love." His departure was not the end, but the beginning of a new chapter, paid with the highest price, but bringing with it the promise of permanent change, deep and inevitable. Within herself, she heard Kale's voice, not as an echo, but as a living resonance. "Live, Ileana. Be the light. Be the bulwark. I am with you in every thread of the ether." That was a vow, a promise that resonated through her being. Her etheric form shook, threatening to lose coherence. The pain was so intense, she barely managed to maintain her protective shields. They had once radiated steadily, and now they flickered, reflecting her inner pain as she struggled to maintain her form's coherence and continue the defense, knowing Kale's sacrifice must not be in vain. She had to fight for him, for all of them, for the very essence of Sylvaeron. His sacrifice became her engine, the fuel feeding her remaining strength, making her even more determined, even stronger and unstoppable force of light. Ileana, once Kale's love and closest comrade in arms, was now transformed. Her luminous form, though still graceful, radiated a new kind of determination, a strength born of unmeasurable grief, but also of unmeasurable will, the will to protect all that remained. Kale's departure did not break her, it forged her. His last thought, "Our light must never go out," resonated in her as a sacred vow, the unyielding energy of her new existence woven into every etheric thread, giving her an immortal purpose. Often her attention, even amidst etheric vigils, would return to Kale's etheric signature, trying to feel at least an echo of his vibration. She did not find it, but the memory of him did not fade. It became part of her being, etched into every etheric thread, a lasting reminder of love and sacrifice. Through her passed the pain of every lost Sylvaeron, of all those who sacrificed themselves. But that pain too was a catalyst, transforming into an energetic strength that suppressed fatigue and weakness. As a leader, Ileana now radiated an authority based not just on strength, but on a deep understanding of suffering and purpose. Her etheric perception was sharpened by grief, allowing her to intuitively grasp the void's weak points, even the subtlest ones, as well as the vulnerabilities threatening to appear in the higher etheric energy itself. Recognizing subtle etheric cracks no one else noticed. Her voice, a telepathic resonance permeating the Sylvaeron collective consciousness, was calm and resolute, instilling confidence and encouragement, guiding them like a lighthouse in a storm, without fear. Her new role was difficult, but she bore it with pride as the bearer of Kale's legacy, ready to take up the burden of the future and carry it to the last spark. Yet, Kale's sacrifice that act of desperate courage bought precious time. It delayed the inevitable and gave the remaining army the chance to regroup. His decision, made in the information of hopelessness, became the eternal fabric of their victory, written into the scalar strings of existence itself, an indelible seal that will forever shine in the hearts of Sylvaerons, reminding them of the price of freedom and light and the courage of one Sylvaeron who gave everything for all. The unintelligible moans of agony, the merging suffering of Sylvaerons, travelers, and guardians culminated. A giant, uncontrolled vibration of scalar energy exploded in the higher etheric energy, distorting everything around it to the point of unrecognizability, tearing the matrix of the ether down to its fundamental threads. The struggle reached its zenith, the point of no return, a point of absolute despair where even entities on the edge of the ether seemed lifeless, losing their brilliance before the encroaching darkness. Suddenly, from the heart of that distortion, emerged a giant, brilliant white higher etheric force. It had no shape nor defined size. It was pure will, inconceivable in its power, beyond any form or magnitude that could be grasped. Its energy was so pure, so absolute, that it was the very essence of resolution, a silent answer to the despair, to the cries of all light beings and entities, to the harmony of the higher etheric balance. It shone not with material light, overwhelming all other vibrations, as if existence itself sighed. It pulsated with inconceivable strength, in information absorbing and reshaping the ether around it, as if reality itself were subject to its will. The scalar strings straightened, vibrations harmonized, and chaos retreated before its unmeasurable presence, transforming the ravaged battlefield into a serene symphony. In the information, that force devoured and destroyed all void entities, leaving not a trace of their evil vibrations behind, only pure emptiness where they once were, as if they had never existed. There was no echo of their evil, no shadow, only absolute nothingness, total elimination, the end of a horror. A silence deeper than any that had ever existed descended upon the scene of the conflict. It cut through the symphony of war and left only the echoes of the higher etheric balance, a deep, calm resonance permeating every corner of the higher etheric energy. There were no shouts of victory, only a deep, intoxicating silence of peace, imbued with grief for the lost, but also a sense of immeasurable gratitude. From that silence, the Sylvaerons felt the presence of something much greater, something that had always transcended them, but had now touched them, etching itself deep into their collective consciousness, leaving an indelible mark of absolute existence, the realization that the higher etheric energy is much more complex than they could ever have imagined. It was a moment of enlightenment, shock, and realization. Everyone present, Sylvaerons, travelers, and guardians, understood the existence of something even greater, something that maintains the etheric and material balance, a force that transcends even their etheric domains, a force above all levels of existence, inconceivable in its wisdom and power, which intervened when all was lost. In the information following that intervention, an insight into the near future flowed through the higher etheric energy once more, returning to them the power of non-linear maneuver. The veil hiding tomorrow lifted, and the etheric flows returned to their original, perfect coherence. The travelers, fulfilling their promise, and in gratitude for the Sylvaerons' kindness, poured their eons of acquired knowledge directly into the Sylvaeron collective consciousness. This opened new levels of understanding of the scalar ether and the material universe, allowing them to grasp the essence of everything, to see the invisible threads connecting all of existence, to hear the whisper of the higher etheric dance itself, to understand the laws of the ether, and to penetrate the secrets of the material universe, reaching levels of consciousness once unimaginable. These were not just bits of information. It was an organic expansion of their perception, a reshaping of their very mode of existence, unlocking hidden potentials, making them true chroniclers of the material fabric and its silent guardian. Afterward, the travelers quietly dispersed, their mission fulfilled, their etheric energy reintegrated into the expanse from which they came. They left the Sylvaerons a legacy beyond all comprehension, a gift of knowledge more valuable than any material victory. These were new layers of etheric understanding, a new perspective on the cosmos, the awareness of infinity and its delicate balance, etched into their etheric being as an indelible truth. The Sylvaerons, now elevated, enriched by ancient knowledge, and with the unshakable support of the guardians, assumed their new sublime role. They no longer needed the portals of the crystal gates to enter and navigate the scalar ether, nor were they bound by material dimensions. They could teleport instantly, and anywhere from any point in the material universe within the higher etheric energy, crossing impossible distances in the blink of a thought, in information like lightning cutting through time and space, leaving behind only the trail of an etheric spark, the light of a new era, the symbol of their new existence. From an etheric perspective, from within the higher etheric energy, they could invisibly oversee any being in the material world, aware of every intertwining of energy, every pulse of life, every hidden intention, every conflict threatening the balance. They had transitioned to a higher level of existence, transformed and ready to accept the responsibility of light guardians, maintaining the fragile balance between worlds and becoming a bulwark against future threats. Their legacy was just beginning, woven into the very threads of existence, promising an eternal vigil over the harmony of the universe as invisible protectors of the entire cosmic order. Silent, omnipresent, vigilant, they bore the memory of Kael's sacrifice as a constant reminder of the price of peace and light, and Ileana's grief transformed into strength, committing her to eternal watching and tireless service in the name of all they lost and all they saved. Ilara, whose etheric form pulsated with silvery and golden hues, became a central figure in the Light Guardian's information network. His ability to feel the subtle flows of the ether and receive direct mental impulses was now amplified to a level exceeding all previous boundaries. He was the ear of the universe, catching the quietest whispers and the strongest cosmic strikes, filtering them through a complex web of etheric perception, turning raw energy into intelligible signals. Ilara could feel every vibration of life, be it the fear of a primate on a distant planet, the joy of a star's birth, or the hidden intention of an entity moving through the ether. It was as if the material cosmos itself sang a symphony directly into his etheric consciousness, but also as if it screamed in pain, for every dissonance, every suffering was transmitted directly to him, causing a pain deeper than any physical sensation. The burden of that knowledge was enormous yet vital, for the fate of countless worlds depended on it. Every pulse, every thread, Ilara thought, his etheric consciousness expanding to encompass millions of worlds. It is connected. No point is hidden. Every thought, every vibration reflects through the etheric web. My role is to be the bridge, to transmit what no one else can see, to understand before danger manifests. The travelers gave me the key, and I must use it with the greatest care. Many planets are in danger, many lives. I feel the weight of balance on my etheric shoulders. Am I ready for this? Is any Sylvaeron ready to be so vulnerable to the universe's suffering? Or were we chosen precisely because we can bear that burden? Sometimes he would be overwhelmed by chaos, the cacophony of billions of voices, feelings, thoughts. The echo of a star's birth joy collided with the moans of a dying civilization, creating a dissonance that nearly disintegrated his etheric form. But Ilara learned to filter, to find meaning in the torrent, to extract the essence of threat from a sea of insignificant signals. His etheric hands, though intangible, were constantly reaching out, feeling through the vibrations, searching for dissonances that could threaten the balance, searching for the subtlest crackling in the fabric of material reality, for what might herald a new void. He was the early warning system, the first line of defense, relying on an intuition that transcended logic, on a deep sense of right and wrong, woven into his being, guided by pure will. Ilara's role became crucial in the Light Guardian's operations. His visions, his resonances, served as guideposts for the Sylvaerons, directing them toward threats before they fully developed. He was a silent hero whose strength lay in his subtle but all-encompassing perception of the universe, the guardian of the etheric pulse itself, tirelessly watching over infinity, ready to warn of any shadow that might emerge. For the Light Guardians, being beyond time and space did not mean mere travel. It was existence in simultaneity, perceiving all moments at once, past, present, and future were no longer linear, but fluid, intertwined threads in the endless etheric weaving. Every thought, every action resonated through all time, flows in the material world, creating a network of cause and effect stretching across eons, from the beginning of existence to its potential end. This brought immense knowledge, but also a profound sense of responsibility, the understanding of the weight of every single decision, the realization that every action of theirs reverberates through all of reality. When the warriors, now Light Guardians, triumphantly materialized on Sylvaeron, they brought with them the essence of inconceivable abilities that spread through the ether, transferring to the entire population. It was not a flash, but a quiet, yet profound transmission through the threads of existence itself. The etheric knowledge and abilities acquired in the higher etheric energy, the knowledge of the travelers, the understanding of the guardians, and the very essence of resistance to the void were transferred to every Sylvaeron, from the youngest to the oldest, changing the very genetic and etheric structure of their race at a fundamental level. It was an etheric gift that permanently reshaped their being and the planet itself, making them a race of guardians par excellence. Now all Sylvaerons possessed exceptional sight. Their eyes were not limited by material obstacles. They could see extremely far, with incredible clarity and details invisible to the ordinary eye. Their vision encompassed the entire color spectrum, far beyond what the material universe offered, from the deepest infrared to the highest ultraviolet frequencies. They saw in total darkness, but also perceived infracolors, allowing them to discern heat patterns, energy signatures, and other phenomena incomprehensible to others. What made this ability truly unique was their power to perceive the colors of the sparks, souls, of all living beings in the material world. Different shades and intensities of these colors revealed the internal state of a being. Blue radiated kindness, light white, yellow indicated happiness, dark gray was sorrow, red was malevolence, purple was manipulativeness, and brown was sickness. This unique ability allowed Sylvaerons to immediately detect the presence of avatars used by other races or civilizations. Avatars were empty biological bodies, physically resembling members of a certain species. but without the presence of their own authentic soul spark. Thanks to their spark color vision, Sylvaerons instantly recognized the absence of that life essence and realized it was a vehicle controlled by a consciousness from elsewhere, allowing them to discern deceptions and hidden intentions, even the subtlest ones hidden behind a mask of flesh. Additionally, all Sylvaerons acquired the ability to shapeshift. They were not limited to their original form. They could mentally specify a species, a race, elemental beings, or an animal with whom they wished to contact or interact, and visually assume the physical form characteristic of that species. This transformation was temporary and served exclusively for easier communication, integration, or understanding of other life forms, allowing them to move unnoticed through material worlds and cultures, gaining knowledge and establishing connections. They did not use this ability for deception, but as a bridge of understanding and empathy, wishing to approach and understand other civilizations on their own terms without imposing their presence. They could see causes and consequences inconceivable to ordinary beings. They felt the collective consciousness of galaxies, the pain of dying stars, and the birth of new civilizations. Every individual vibration in the universe was available to them, from the whisper of an atom to cosmic explosions. They realized that every decision, even the smallest, had far-reaching implications for all of existence. The weight of that knowledge was enormous, requiring unshakable ethics and wisdom at every step. The free will of other beings became a delicate balance they had to respect, intervening only when the fate of entire civilizations was at stake. They were aware that every intervention, even with the best intention, carried the risk of changing the fundamental laws of the universe, creating unforeseen chain reactions that could overturn the cosmic order. Despite their transformation, the Sylvaerons remained connected to their material roots. Although they could dwell in the etheric domain and perceive it in ways once impossible, they still retained their material forms and the ability to return to their home planet, Sylvaeron. Going into the ether was a choice, and returning to Sylvaeron was always possible, a journey beyond dimensions that allowed them to reconnect with their origins, with the sense of their forests, the soil beneath their feet, the faces of their loved ones, and the very essence of their culture. That connection to home was an anchor in the infinite ether, reminding them of the fragility of the material world and of what they protect the essence of what they were before they became something more. Spread the word about our civilization as far as possible to everyone you know, so that all may hear and discover the wonders of the Sylvaerons. For the more you know about us, the closer will be the moment of our arrival.